This is Filmmasters. On this episode, we will be installing our 3-string guitar bridge. That's you can see the silver one. And we'll also be installing our 2-string hurdy-gurdy wheels bridge at the back, which you can see the handle coming out of. Now, there's 2 different versions of that, but we'll get into that shortly. We'll install our Cigar box 3-string bridge first of all. So let's get into the tutorial. First of all, let's have a look at the 3-string bridge. It's an adjustable one. You can see there's some hex screws at the very front, and it comes with a small hex tool so that you can obviously, or an Allen key so that you can use it, and also comes with 4 screws so that you can install it. That's what you get for around $6, and we're going to be installing it on the back. So I'm going to use a large piece of metal. It's nice and straight. You can use wood. And what I'm doing is I'm going to line it up against the small guitar neck like you can see and get an idea of where the strings are going to be to make sure it's nice and straight. And that's going to give me a good idea of where to put that bridge. So I'm going to line it up, obviously, making sure it's nice and square. And then I'll lift it up and I'll put that bridge right underneath it. And that'll give me an idea of where the strings are. And you can see on the back there's some adjustment screws there as well. So I'll show you how to do the adjustment once we've done it. But what we want to do is make sure it's nice and square. We want to make sure that it is flush with the back of the soundboard, not the actual side soundboard as you can see here. So you can see where I've got the placement for it, and I'm just going to make sure that it is nice and square, obviously, and it's all lined up. And once I've done that, I'm just going to get a pencil or a pen, and I'm going to put my marks where I want the screws. And then obviously I'm going to use a drill and use a small drill bit in order to drill down. I'm not going to show you the whole process. Obviously, you know how to apply a hole now in an apprehension engine if you've come this far. And we're going to drill down, obviously, so I've sped up this video. And this is going to help so that when we're putting the screw in, and obviously the screw where it's sitting is going to go straight into the actual side frame that is underneath the soundboard. And then it's just a matter of putting the screws in and screwing them down. I'm not going to show you myself putting all the screws in. I'm simply going to show you just doing 1 or 2. In fact, I'll just show you doing 2, and then we'll move on to the next part of the tutorial. And I've put all the 4 screws in. The next thing we're going to move on to is we're going to use some leftover timber. Now you've got 2 options. We've got the option of using the leftover timber from the large guitar neck, and I've got another option, which is I've made a smaller, thinner plywood version of it. Now you've got 2 options, so you can choose one that is more traditional like Mark Korven's one, or you can go along the new route in which I've created a different type of guitar holder. And as you can see, it is 1 piece of plywood, which then I've glued 2 pieces together like so, and there's 2 pieces there, and I've sanded them down. And then what I've done is I've used a piece of aluminium to support the top where the strings will go into. I've also put a cross on there just to give it a gothic look, and that's just some leftover wood that I found. So that's something that you can do if you want. It is an option. I'm going to show you how to obviously use the larger one first of all, and it's up to you which way you want to go. So first of all, the strings for the large guitar neck or the hurdy-gurdy wheel are exactly 1.5 inches apart. So each string is 1.5 inches apart. So what we want to do is measure to make sure that we've got our 1.5 inches right in the center of our piece of wood. One option is obviously to find the center of your piece of wood and then move your adjustment of your 1.5 inches onto the piece of wood and then mark it. I'm also going to make sure that it is a 1/4 of an inch down from the very top, which is around about, let's say, 1 centimeter from the top. And that is where we'll put our holes on this actual part of the apprehension engine. Obviously, I'll use a square to make sure that it is all exactly lined up and square on the piece of wood, obviously. And I'll just use a texter so that you can see the mark. So that's where we're going to be drilling our hole. I'm going to use a very fine drill bit when I'm doing it. It's not going to be any thicker than the string. So you want it to be a little bit thicker than the string, obviously, that you'll be using, which will be the cello strings. And then obviously we're going to line it up. So to line it up, we're going to line it up against the hurdy-gurdy wheel. So you lift it up, make it square, and I'm just going to drop it down probably about 1/4 of an inch to line it up. So once I've done that, you can see it's just sitting below the actual hurdy-gurdy wheel. And I'm going to use a pencil now and just find out where the crank is for the hurdy-gurdy wheel and mark it. And then what I'll do is I'll find the center of the piece of wood using a square, lining it up on the mark I just made. And that is where obviously our hurdy-gurdy wheel will be drilled out. So depending on the size of wood that you're using, use your piece of material in order to find the dead center for that, and then mark it. And then we're going to use a drill that is slightly larger than the crank. As you can see, this one is slightly larger, and then we'll obviously drill through our piece of material. So I've sped this up because obviously you don't need to see the whole process. You know how to drill a piece of wood now. And there we have it. So I'll be able to now put it on there and it will sit there nice and flush. And you can see there's a little bit of movement, which is good. Now I've also trimmed the base of it down, as you can see, because the piece of material is a little bit longer. So measure your box. You don't want it to be too long or overhang from the base of it. Next, I'm going to use a piece of wood. Now, if you remember, underneath is a frame in which we built on the Apprehension engine. One piece sits up this way. So I'm going to draw an approximate line. They'll give me an idea where to put the screws. Now the top of the frame is obviously on this angle, as you can see. And I'll just give me an idea of approximately where it sits underneath the Apprehension engine. And then obviously where I'm making these marks is where we will screw into the actual box itself. So I'm going to use a ruler now and just make sure that I've got my measurement nice and accurate where I want to put the screws in. Again, it's entirely up to you the distance you want to do it. Don't make the screws too close together. Try and get them approximately like where I've got it, or even in line with where the actual cello strings will go through on the piece of material. So if you want to, you can make it line up 1.5 inches spacing in between each one. So I'm going to show you, obviously the measurements are exactly the same for the smaller part that I've used. Now the reason I've done it this way is because one, the strings themselves won't have that much tension on them. So there's not going to be any movement in this piece of plywood because it's obviously it's two pieces glued together. And I've used a piece of aluminium on it to strengthen it. So the measurement again is still 1.5 inches. The hole is exactly the same location. And I'm going to obviously on my piece now just put approximately where I want to put the screw in. Now the screw I've already marked on this piece of material. Again, if you want to use the traditional one that Mark Korven's Apprehension engine has, make the larger one using some leftover timber from your large guitar neck. Otherwise, if you want to make one like mine, you can do that. It just makes it look a little bit more, I guess, narrow and streamlined. And it makes it more unique as well. I also think having that cross on there gives it that gothic look, so it goes with the horror instrument sort of feel, I guess you could say. So you can see the difference between the traditional hurdy-gurdy bridge and my new version. So I'm going to install my hurdy-gurdy wheel bridge on. It's exactly the same as the other one. Just make sure that you pre-drill, obviously, the holes where the screw goes in because you don't want to split the timber when you're doing it. I'm going to use a square to make sure that my piece of material is flush. I'm going to use a pencil on one side just to mark it so I know when I'm screwing it in that it doesn't move. Now, it's a good idea, obviously, to pre-drill through this part as well for your screws. And I've already done that, so I'm going to put my screws straight into it. And it goes straight on the box like so. So now we've got our two bridges in place and installed. And it's just a matter now of just putting our handle back on. So I'm going to put my handle back on and tighten it on. I'll use 2 adjustable wrenches to do it. Now you can put a spring washer on there obviously to lock it down If you want to, you can also put 4 nuts on there. Put 2 at the beginning, and then put your handle on, and then tighten it on with a third, and then finish it off with another one. But it depends on what you want to go for in the look of it. And here we have it. So we've now got our 2 bridges on there. We've got one for the 3-string guitars, and we've also got our bridge for our hurdy-gurdy wheel. All installed, all ready to go. And obviously we've already put our guitar tuners on there. So this is what we're up to now. Now in the next tutorial, we will be installing our pickups and our reverb tank. So if you want to become a Filmmaster subby, it is pretty simple. You can subscribe to the channel. You can like me on Facebook and on Twitter. And until next time, don't just film it, master it.